Good morning, everybody. Welcome to another Mortgage Coach Tuesday interview. Every Tuesday, we are here to bring leadership. And my goal on these Tuesday meetings are just to put on the best sales meeting in the mortgage industry every week, every Tuesday. And so I bring in what I think are incredible guests. Sometimes it's a top loan officer. Today, it's an author. It's a leader in the mortgage and real estate space. And it's John Ruhlin, the author of Giftology. What's up, John?
Hey, Dave. How are you?
I'm good, man. I'm really looking forward to this interview. You have been recommended to me countless times over a number of years to interview, and I'm not sure why. Like, this is the first time I'm getting you in the mortgage coach community, because I mean, it's been years that we've kind of gone back and forth on email and known about each other, but we're finally here, dude.
And two busy guys. Sometimes it just timing's everything, and it's not like we've both been twiddling our thumbs the last few years. It's a big world out there. So I'm honored to be here. I've heard about you a lot too, and Brittany Hodak and others have been bragging. So I'm sure a lot of good stuff's going to come from this.
Well, I think Brittany is the one that finally got us on a stage together, a virtual stage. But a number of people, when I posted in our Facebook group that you were the guest, a number of people were like, "Love that guy. He's awesome." Michelle Castle cool. With Guild said some nice things about you. I'll pull up the stream in a minute and call out some of your fans in our community. But since it is the first time you've been on our YouTube channel, you've been on this stage, just tell us a little bit about you. So anyone who doesn't know you, they're like, okay, I know where the guy's coming from.
Yeah, well, I mean, most people know us for the book Giftology. We've actually owned a gifting agency for 20 years, and most people aren't waking up at 4 a.m. One of my best friends is Hal Elrod from Miracle Morning. Most people aren't waking up at 4 a.m. saying, "Man, if I just got my gifting strategy together, my business would 10x." But every industry, whether it's mortgage, real estate, widget manufacturing, pro sports, everybody cares about relationships. Everybody would say relationships are what makes a business rise and fall. And what most people don't realize is how you show up for those relationships and how you show gratitude and appreciation basically determines whether or not people feel like they matter or not. And we all know that people make decisions based emotionally on how they feel. Do I trust this person? Are they top of mind? Do they have my back? And the core of what we've been doing for the last 20 years, like I didn't grow up hanging out with affluent people and business people. I grew up on a farm milking goats every morning out of Ohio. But I had a mentor early on who was a rainmaker. And the reason everybody loved him was because he was generous. And so a lot of what I teach and have been teaching for 20 years, and even to this day, a lot of what our gifting agency does on the done for you side teaches people really how to show up for people powerfully when most people go cheap and pull back and, cut corners and say, you know what, a text is better than, is easier than a handwritten note. And none of the stuff that we talk about is rocket science, but the recipe that we've laid out for entrepreneurs all the way up to billion-dollar companies, if they do it well, then referrals flock in and people are engaged and retained. And if they don't, then they're kind of mediocre and average like everybody else, which is kind of the norm. And so the core of Giftology is showing up for people, loving on people powerfully. And if you do that, relationships flourish.
God, there's so many different directions we could go with this. I do want to make sure at some point we get into the concept of milestone gifts, because I interviewed Tim Brahim and a top producer in our community last year on best practices. And, Tim's one of those guys where he always killed it in the mortgage business, and he did have strategy and intention around closing gifts, but he's found over the past couple of years, little gifts throughout the transaction at milestones was even more powerful. So I want to make sure we get to like what are best practices on gift giving, what are milestone gifts and strategies of best practices. But I want to unpack just a little bit about, growing that heart of generosity and gratefulness and how we show it. I mean, were you always like that? Were you were like this giftology guy just waiting to find business, or was there a moment in your career or a year in your career where you kind of went from, I'm not a gift giver and I wasn't strategic, and you became one? I'd just like to unpack that a little bit.
Yeah, well, I would say no. Like I grew up poor on a farm, so I grew up without like wanting to go do something different. But I would say that my life changed because I interned with Cutco, the knife company, when I was 20, out of desperation to pay for med school. And the attorney who was the father of the girl I was dating, the rainmaker, he was like he completely like shattered my paradigm, because when you're poor, you notice when people are generous. And Paul, the guy who's the attorney, he would like find deals on noodles and buy like a semi load of noodles and show up church the next Sunday. Like 200 people would walk away with a year's supply. I'm like, Paul, that was 40 G's. Like, are you nuts? Like, I was just doing the math in my head. I was like, this just is unfathomable. And Paul like just did that all the time. Not because it was Christmas, not because it was a 20-year anniversary. It was just who he was. And I saw how like deals would come into him as this law firm owner of people that he had done something nice for 30 years ago. And he was just always writing notes. He just like showed up for people consistently with this, what I call radical generosity or giftology kind of mindset. And I just saw how like he attracted, like I looked at him at 20 and I'm like, he was 60 at the time. And I was just like, I want people to respond to me the way they respond to Paul. Like everybody just loved to be around the guy. Like every time everybody had an idea or a deal or real estate, or like he owned oil wells and gas wells and banks, and it was because everybody loved him. And so I think if I hadn't seen it walked out the way that Paul had done for 40 years, I wouldn't have been convinced to go do it myself. But as a 20-year-old college kid, instead of buying beer, I started buying $300 Cutco carving sets and sending them out to CEOs I'd want to get a meeting with. And I'd put, I'd engrave the CEO's name and his wife's name, and I'd put a little handwritten note inside that said, carve out 5 minutes for me. I promise to be with your time. And so most people would, send a shoe for $3 they got at Walmart. I'm spending $300. So I would get the meeting. And so when I started to see I was getting access to people in the hundreds of millions or even billionaires, I started to realize like this, there's a recipe, there's a system, there's a process to this. And it inspired me to be even more generous to this point where, 20 years ago, I was spending $500 a month on gifts. And that was a lot as a college kid. $500 a month, buys a lot of beer, buys a lot of whatever. Now we're up to this year, we'll invest 600 grand personally in gifts. Now that's a 20-year evolution, but I've been able to unlock things because I see how people respond to showing up powerfully when most people are, pulling back. And so it's been that 20-year process.
I love that. Well, Mortgage Coach community, I want to pull you into this conversation. Michelle Castle not only said, some nice things about you, she posted this quote: "We make a living by what we get. We make a life by what we give." A Winston Churchill quote. Jack Daly, who I've interviewed multiple times, said people will love his message. Key is to take action. So remember, guys, take some notes, take some action. If Jack Daly said take action, you should. Sue Meitner is a big fan of yours. I don't know if you know Sue, but she said some nice things. And then, one of the iconic people I've interviewed, major leader in the mortgage space, Michael Mayer, said some nice things about you in comments in our Facebook group too. So guys, if you're listening to this and you have already read this book and you have a budget for how much you're investing in gifts for your clients, let us know. Let us know what your favorite quote was. I would be curious, if you're listening to this interview right now, what do you budget annually or monthly or however you calculate it on gift giving? We will get to best practices. I want to unpack a little more high level before we get into the tactics of best practices, because you said you have a formula and you have a framework now. Walk me through that, like at a high level, describe that a little bit. We might be borrowing from your book, but I want to get as much as I can out of you.
Well, what's interesting is that almost everybody has an operations plan or a marketing plan or a business plan or financial plan. You ask people what their relationship plan is, and most people, even big companies, they have like a deer in headlights look. And I'm like, what's your plan to love on these people? Not once a year at Christmas, not at a closing. Like if everybody's, it's very sexy because of Vaynerchuk to talk about playing the long game, but most people's long game is days, not decades. I play the game in decades, and the people that I know, like a Jack Daly, I'm having dinner with him tomorrow night at his house. And
are you a Southern California guy? Are you in Southern California?
I'm flying out tomorrow to go speak to keynote, of all places in California, for YPO and also EO. So two big CEO groups. And both of them are in Orange County. So I'm flying into to John Wayne and having dinner with Jack and a few other people.
Well, make sure you send me a picture with Jack. I mean, he's a mentor of mine. When I lived in SoCal, I used to get together with him a couple times a year, and just an important person that, was very influential to me in my younger career.
He's iconic, man. I mean, I met Jack through a couple other people, and rather than just ask, like I've sent some pretty crazy gifts to Jack, where he's cried, but it's like, a guy like that, he's grown 3 companies to $1 billion in revenue. Like, to get even an hour of his time is worth tens of thousands of dollars, and he's become a mentor and friend, and so yeah, I'll definitely snap a little selfie on the beach with him and send it to you. But most people, kind of getting back to the relationship plan, like the equation should be whatever the value of the relationships that you have in your life are, the people that could be valuable as a long-term partnership, you should be investing a percentage of your profits back into those relationships to grow them and eventually to turn them into your own personal sales force. Like, I couldn't hire Jack Daly to be a sales rep for me for $2 million a year, but he goes out because based upon the thousands we've invested into him and shown up for him, he goes and tells all kinds of people about John Ruhlin and Giftology. And, I could never hire him as a sales rep, but he sells for me. And I think most people have this short-sighted, like, oh, I have good retention. I'm like, I don't care what your retention is. Do you have actively loyal relationships? Do you have people that will go out of their way to stick their neck out to talk about you to their friends, family, and influence? And the way to do that is to have a consistent way to show up for people. And for us, we reinvest 15% of our net profits back into our relationships. And that may be a monthly number or a yearly number, but for us, like, having a relationship plan and then doing, like, nobody on the planet would go take their clients out to McDonald's for dinner, but most people do all the other parts of their business at like a Morton's or Ritz-Carlton level, and their gifting is like the redheaded stepchild doing it at a McDonald's level, and they wonder why it doesn't work. It doesn't work because it's not at the same congruency. So the core of what our system is being just as intentional, just as thoughtful. I even hate the word gift anymore. We use the word love bomb or artifact, because gift evokes like Harry and David in peanut brittle is a gift. Like a stress ball or a water bottle, that's a gift, or a trinket or a swag or tchotchke. Like, you're not going to move the hearts of affluent people by sending some crappy piece of stuff from China with your logo on it. People call that their gifting budget. And I'm like, that's a touch, that's a trinket, that's fine, what it is. But don't mistake what a promotional item is and what a thoughtful artifact or gift is. Those are two very different things. And I think in our Western society, being very transactional, we've kind of blended things together, and we've missed the mark of, like, we'd never go to somebody's wedding and give them a tchotchke with our logo on it. Why would we do that in business? Those are still human being relationships. And so our goal is to kind of call out in love and say, hey, if relationships matter, everything that touches that relationship should be at the same level 10. Otherwise, you're miscommunicating and not staying congruent.
Well, that's interesting. I have felt like that. I mean, hey, I have bought things with our logo on it that were gifts, and I'm with you. It's like a marketing touch point that stands out, but it's not something that makes people cry. It's not something they necessarily keep. It's not something they necessarily eat. So let's what are some good examples of gifts? And I want to hear some like over the top, super creative things, and I want to hear some things that aren't that expensive, but they're just thoughtful. Like, what are some examples? I'm just curious.
Yeah, so the over the top. So when we're laying out like a plan of budgeting and whatever else, 80% should be proactive gifting, where you lay out and say, hey, this is my top 100, top 500, top 1,000. These are the 4 times a year I'm going to send them a cool, thoughtful artifact. But then 20% of your budget, I call the crazy one-off gifts. Like crazy, like you find out somebody's kid's getting into Harvard and you send them $500 in Harvard gear. Or, for me, the guys I originally met 14 years ago when I joined EO was Cameron Harold. He wrote 5 books. One of them's called Double Double. And he's coached 3 different, he's been a COO of 3 different companies that have grown over 100 million in revenue. One of them being 1-800-GOT-JUNK, probably the most well-known. But like he's coached like the Sheikh of Qatar in like their 300 companies that they own. And so when I met him, I was like, I want to get his attention. And I invited him to a dinner and a ball game. It was like opening night of Cavs. I was living in Cleveland at the time. And I thought Cameron was going to like high five me and be like so excited to go to this Cavs game and go to Morton's. And his response was the most underwhelming response ever. He's like, I guess I'll go. I don't have anything else going on. And so internally, I'm like, duh, like everybody does the same playbook. We take people to dinner, cigars, golf, the same stuff, ball games. It's like the same playbook. Cameron's going to go on 100 dinners. Who cares? So I found out that he loved Brooks Brothers. And long story short is I ended up finding out what his sizes were, and I ended up outfitting his entire hotel room with $7,000 of Brooks Brothers. Jackets, suits, pants, belts, sweaters, everything. It looked like a Brooks Brothers store in his Ritz-Carlton room. When he went and checked into the room and came down to grab dinner with me that night, his eyes were the size of silver dollars. He said, John, whatever you want to talk about for as long as you talk about it, I'm all ears. I've never had anybody treat me this way. Now, I continued to send him gifts every year or every quarter for 10 straight years. Probably invested 20 grand into that one relationship. And people are like, John, why did you continue to give him gifts? You already had them after the Brooks Brothers experience. And I'm like, when you love on people and show up, whether it's your spouse or your client, when you want to, not because you have to, but you chose to, that's when it means the most. And so because I continue to love on him, beyond the $7,000 experience, he has opened up, like we spoke back in February in Australia, they paid us for a 60-minute keynote, $85,000 for one keynote, a Fortune 500 company. The reason they booked me was because of things Cameron did. He's gone out and sold. Before I had a book, before I had stages, all these other things, he went and like, when he was double booked, he'd recommend John Ruhlin. They'd be like, who's John Ruhlin? And Cameron would be like, just trust me. So my first $10,000, $15,000, $20,000 speaking gigs were all as a direct result of how I showed up for Cameron, and he became my sales rep. So that's an extreme example. Now, you don't have to spend $7,000 to get somebody's attention. Like, one of my favorite gifts of all time is something I've given to Jack Daly. I used to make fun of the corporate coffee mug as being the worst gift on the planet. People would put like Hershey Kisses on inside and think they're being cute. And I'm like, you can only drink out of one coffee cup at a time. Like, most people have their favorite, everything else goes to Goodwill. And so this artist made one, it's called an artifact mug for me and for my wife. They're $1,000 a piece. So it's not $7,000, it's still a lot. And the reason they're $1,000 is carved into each of these mugs is somebody's life story, the tragedies they've overcome, the mentors, their core values, their faith, their family. It's like a lifetime achievement award in this usable piece of art. When I gave one to Jack, it spelled out his wife who passed away. They've been married for 50 years. It spelled out the word Bonnie. And when he saw that mug and saw what was represented in it, like he started to get, like teary-eyed. And Jack's a pretty steely dude. Like it's not easy to to get him to tear up. But these mugs, I've seen billionaires cry from these pieces. And I've even had people say, John, my $50,000 watch is less valuable than this stupid mug. This mug reminds me every single day when I'm drinking my coffee of what matters in it. It reminds me of my legacy. It reminds me of what's important to me. And so it's not like there's a lot of people that can spend more money than you. The question is, can you be more thoughtful and more creative with the dollars that you have? Because we don't have unlimited budgets as entrepreneurs. No, none of us do. And a lot of us are going up against publicly traded companies. So we have to be more thoughtful than our competition. And oftentimes, the handwritten note that goes with the gift is more valuable than what the gift is itself. Like the gift is just a delivery vehicle for an emotion. I tell people all the time, if you're just starting out, handwrite, like my buddy, Mr. Thank You, John Israel, another Cutco guy, handwrite one thank you note a day for a year. Like that's 365 people. And if you put a lot of thought into that, that's 365 people that are probably keeping that note. And so to me, it's not spending more money, it's being more thoughtful in your competition.
Well, I hope everybody writes down that. It's not about spending more money. It's about being more thoughtful and being more creative. And I don't know if you ever met Bonnie, Jack's
I didn't have the opportunity.
Wife. She was amazing. They always had a really cool Christmas party every year, and I went to a few of those. And so I can imagine if you gave something with Bonnie's name on it, it was just something he'll never forget and something he'll always remember. And remember, guys, everybody has that, but like, do you know that person well enough? So go deeper with people, understand who they are, get unique gifts around that. Now, I want to remind everybody, because I serve the mortgage industry, and let's face it, there's compliance when it comes to giving gifts. We do have a lot of compliance guidelines. So first of all, anyone who's listening to this, make sure that when it comes to gift giving, that you've checked with your compliance officer to make sure whatever you're doing aligns with your company's guidelines when it comes to gift giving. And some of the things that you've thrown at us so far, John, probably don't meet the criteria of compliance gift giving in the mortgage industry.
Yeah.
So our space, and you probably know those compliance guidelines. So what are some things that great loan officers are doing? And then whenever I do these interviews, while I'm interviewing it for loan officers, I'm trying to help mortgage professionals be better leaders to realtors. So I would
Yep.
love some best practices for loan officers. And then I would love some ideas where loan officers can come and talk to a realtor and say, hey, I just listened to, this interview on the Mortgage Coach channel with John of Giftology, and I got a great idea for you. So what are some practical ideas, compliant ideas for mortgage professionals?
Yeah. Well, what I'd say is that oftentimes the people are external focused first in all industries, including the mortgage and real estate. And what I tell people is, as a leader of a company, one of the things I think is most important is taking care of your own employees. And so you might not be able to gift externally at the level that I'm talking about, but you are able to take care of your own team or your own employees or your assistant. Like I do things like for my own team and my assistants, like I pay to have people's houses cleaned every other week. And people are like, well, that's a lot of money. And I'm like, nobody brags about their 401k, but they will brag that they have a house cleaner every other week showing up at their house to take care of them. And so a lot of the things that we try to challenge people on is taking care of all of the people around you that allow you to have a business. And it's not just your clients, it's not just your centers of influence, it could be anybody. One of the things that I've seen people be able to do, in any industry, mortgage included, is take something that most people have a cheap version of. A great example is, most people will be like, oh, I want to give a watch. And so they're giving out, Apple watches or maybe a, Fossil watch. And, they give out a Fossil watch to somebody that's wearing a Rolex. Like they're never going to, even if you spent $200 on the watch, they're never going to take that watch off. But imagine if you took something like a luggage tag. Most people have like a $2 luggage tag at Fast Time. But maybe you go and you get one that's handmade for like $70. That has a brass tag that has their address, and you include one for their spouse and whatever else. Most people would never go buy a $70 luggage tag for themselves, but they would love to have one. And so finding our big thing is like our business cards are made out of metal. Before it was cool to have metal business cards 12 years ago, we had a goal to set I wanted my business card to communicate that little things like details mattered. So we created the metal business card. And then I noticed you don't get very many handwritten notes anymore. What if we had the nicest handwritten note on the planet? So I spend $9 on a sheet of steel and I write on it with a Sharpie, and we send out a couple thousand of them a year, handwritten. And people will frame these things. I'm like, most people will spend $18 on some flashlight that from China that's going to fall apart in like 30 days. I would rather spend half the amount of money on a handwritten piece of stationery that's metal. Take some time, write a really heartfelt, thoughtful note to somebody and send it off to them out of the blue just because I was thinking of them. And I'll spend 50% less on a $9 item. People are like, $9 is a lot for a piece of stationery. I'm like, in our TikTok, Facebook Messenger world, like something tangible showing up with heartfelt messaging behind it goes a long way. On the topic that you mentioned on real estate, we work with a lot of realtors, we work with a lot of home builders. And a lot of times people will do this big basket or whatever else for closing, and that's normal. And this home builder that we work with builds a couple hundred homes every year, and they work with a realtor for all their homes. And they do the typical move-in basket, which people kind of have expected. But the big thing that we do is we still partner with Cutco. We still do millions of dollars in the silly knives. But what we do is we do this like $500, $600, $700 knife set that's personalized to the family. We don't do it at closing. We wait for 6 months after the closing's long gone and people think, oh, the builder's done, wherever else. Like they got my money, they're moved in, and they're going to be in the home, 5, 10, maybe 20, 50 years. Who knows? But this knife set with a handwritten note from the owner of the building company shows up and says, hey, from one family to another, so honored that you entrusted us. I know you're going to have a lot of celebrations in this home. And the knives have nothing on them about the builder. It's all of the family name and the spouse's name, and maybe something that's, if they're a person of faith, it's engraved with their scripture verse or whatever else. But now they have this artifact sitting on the countertop, staring them in the face for the next 20 years. And guess what? Every time somebody comes over, they're talking about, you can't believe it. They already gave us a gift at closing. And then 6 months later, they sent us this love bomb, this crazy gift. So I think if I'm in mortgage or real estate, I'm trying to find, it's like in a marriage. If you only do gifts on anniversaries, birthdays, Christmas, and Valentine's Day, like those are table stakes. You don't earn brownie points for doing something for Valentine's Day if you've been married for 20 years. I've been married for 11 years. Like But when I show up on random Tuesdays and my wife, we have 4 little girls, and I say, hey, honey, I came home early. Like I already lined up a spa treatment. You go for the afternoon. I got everything under control. That's where like people are like, did you do something wrong? Like, what's going on? Like, this is like, because it's a surprise, because you're doing it not out of obligation or expectation. You're doing it because you want to. And so for us, laying out a schedule of what I call planned randomness, the surprise and delight has to be there if you really want to delight somebody and inspire them to go act on your behalf. So the timing is just as important as what you're investing or what you're sending. Does that make sense?
It does. And I just made a note, planned randomness. I also made a mental note on it's the surprises and waiting 6 months to give the gift. I mean, let's face it, guys, we're playing the long game here. And you are trying to create clients for life. So what you do during that transaction to get a 5-star review, those are table stakes. And those are important. I don't want to minimize what you need to do to deliver a 5-star transactional experience, but what you do afterwards matters. I love what John is sharing. And then I want to remind you, everybody in the community, the things like services of value, an annual review is probably one of the most valuable things that you can give a family. It doesn't cost you anything, but some time and some discipline. Those things matter. And what are some other things? And then I want to come back to some transactional things that we can do. Are
Yeah.
you seeing, clients in the mortgage industry doing milestone gifts like, hey, here's what you get at approval, here's what you get at closing, and then 6 months later? Is that something you're seeing in your community of loan officers or mortgage
Yeah.
professionals?
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely, I think the more progressive ones are realizing that having those anchors or those touch points that kind of build towards, the end goal, which is obviously getting, the loan or getting things closed. So absolutely. And obviously you can't afford in any industry, even if there was no regulations, you can't necessarily afford to send, $500, $1,000 knife set like at every touch point. But I do think that the smart ones are building in the elements of personalization or the elements of like, it doesn't feel automated. Like if something shows up from Amazon with a type card, it feels different than if your assistant hand wrote a little card and put it with it, or you partnered with an agency or somebody, that dropped that out, and it feels like it was coming from one human to the other. And I think those are the little things, even if you're going to do like, I'm not a big fan of food in a lot of cases because you consume it and then it's gone. You don't get very many impressions past that. But I do think that like something that we did, and I've seen other people duplicate this, is when you have kids, a lot of people have young kids, and getting them to eat healthy is very difficult. And so one of the things that we've done is we partnered with the high-end gourmet healthy candy company. In this case, it was called Smart Sweets, and we sent like a little case of these healthy gummy bears that don't have a bunch of sugar and chemicals and all this other stuff. So it broke my rule of not doing a consumable, but when people have kids and you know how difficult it is to get them to eat healthy and not have a bunch of junk and artificial anything, and you tie it into their family, like one of my core principles on Giftology is it's one thing to do it for the owner of the company or the person signing the check, but when you can honor what I call the inner circle, and that's the spouse, that's the assistant, that's the kids, that's the pets. The smart people I see in mortgage are saying, hey, this person has a dog. Let's do, some custom dog biscuits for the dog. Hey, let's do a custom bowl that's, like might only cost $20, but now like you're tapping into somebody's inner circle. And when the inner circle loves you, then they become advocates and talking about it. And you're providing these little triggers, these tangible triggers for you to get brought up into every conversation that takes place in that home. And that's our end goal, is like, the reason we focus so much on the kitchen or the home versus the office or these other things is most people gather with their inner circle, their family, their friends, their referral people at their home. They break bread with them. So I want to own the conversation in the hub. And I want our mortgage officers, and I want our real estate professionals, and really even our pro sports clients. People are like, oh, I want to give a jersey, like the Cubs are a client of ours. I'm like, how about we do something that they are going to talk about at their home? They don't need another jersey or another baseball sign. Like they already got 100 of those. Do something that treats them as a human being and taps into their home life versus just their business or their sports life. And coming at it from a different angle is where you win. Because like I said, like there's a lot of people that kind of follow the same playbook over and over again. And when you can have that creative element of like, oh, like a lot of my clients do have pets, or a lot of my clients do have kids. How can I tap into those people? That's where you can spend less money and win.
I love it, man. There's so many different directions we could go at this point. I do want to call out Jeremy Forcier real quick, because I recently spoke at a retreat he did for his team. And I do think, guys, hey, we're in the mortgage business and it's been one busy, overwhelming year. And you made a good point that we can do a lot for our team. And here was a very unique gift that Jeremy did for his team. Tell me if you've ever heard of this one before. I bet you have not heard this idea before. So he's in Sonoma County, California, kind of
Yep.
farm country, wine country. And I don't know how he ended up buying a cow and putting a freezer, but he bought a, organic cow, bought a big freezer, and one of the amenities for his team was like free meat. They could just come in and grab free meat from the cooler. Have you ever heard that idea before?
No, I mean, I've sent out of California. There's a company called Bel Campo, which owns like a 40,000 acre ranch. It's all
I know it.
Humane, blah, blah, blah. So like, I've heard of people doing crazy stuff and pairing that with, knives or in a crazy $500 cooler or whatever else. But like the idea of buying a cow and saying, hey, the meat's on me this year. But I mean, it doesn't really cost. I bought half a cow before for my family and put it in the deep freeze. Like, it probably, a couple grand. I don't know how many people are on his team, but like it adds up when you're going to the supermarket buying organic beef or pork or whatever else. So like, I love the idea of tapping into something like that and sharing. That's awesome.
Yeah, well, it came up because his team was talking about it. Throughout the time I was spending there hanging out with them, they thought it was super cool. So it's those unexpected little things that people remember. Again, I'm not here to advocate that, hey, in the mortgage business, go buy a cow, but I am advocating that, love on your team and share best practices with each other. So let's get it down to some practical takeaways in the mortgage space. Also, do you have a website? You've mentioned a couple times that we do this, we do that. Is there a website that people can engage with you at?
Well, what I'd say is that, you can buy the book, you can go to Giftology Group, but if you want like our playbook, our blueprint of how we think about, whether somebody's a solopreneur, financial advisor, real estate professional, or the Chicago Cubs, we take everybody through the same process of, who to send the gift to is more important than what you're sending. So we have a recipe that we follow of how much to invest and when to send and why to send and all of that. We charge thousands to walk through that program with us. But if your tribe wants to go download the entire playbook and do it on their own for free, they can go to giftologysystem.com. And it comes with tutorial videos and literally like we give away our secret sauce, our recipe. Because we know a certain percentage of people are going to come back to us and say, hey, this is really difficult to do. Can you just do it for us? But everything is there to engage. Our whole 20-year playbook of how to think about being strategic with your gifting and how to think about what to invest. And that'd probably be even before you go buy Giftology, go download the free, the free playbook.
So is this it right here? Is that the web page right there?
Yep.
Okay, guys, we'll put a link in chat in all channels that you're watching this, whether you're watching the recording in YouTube or you're watching it right now in Facebook. We'll get a link to this. Robert, if you could post that right now. So you think this is even a better place to start than your book? Like the book's great, but this is better.
I think it's, the book, we came out with this about a year ago. The book came out 4 years ago. So what I would say is, if you're somebody who wants to fast track and you're like, I get the concept, I know it's important, I'm not doing it well, or I'm not investing enough, and I want to talk to my team and figure out a plan to do this. I think the book, it's a 90-minute read. So the book is awesome. We got, I think, up over 550 reviews on Amazon on the book, which, for a very niche book like Giftology is a lot of reviews. But I would say that, downloading the system and diving in, if you're kind of a fast track kind of person and you're like, hey, I get the concept, I don't need to dive into the book. I want to save some time. That's the direction I'd go.
All right. So we got a couple different links in here for you guys. One to the main website and two to the step-by-step operating playbook. So check that out. Uh, if you are watching this right now and you have like, hey, this is the most practical, the most memorable, the thing that I thought was the most valuable gift that I've given to a client, whether it was a milestone gift during the transaction or whether it was a thank you closing gift, I want to know what that is. So share it. John and I, we won't beat you up, but we'll give you some feedback on it. So share, what are some of the best gifts that you're doing now or you've done in the past? Let's get the community a little involved here, guys. So please share some ideas down below. And I like dog bowl. I never thought of that, but I know we recently stayed at a boutique hotel and, we told them we were going to bring our dog. They had questions that they asked. When we showed up, they had a water bowl that we could take home with our dog's name on it. They had a little printed up thing, and I remember, walking in the room and we knew that the fact that they had asked questions about our dog, that, hey, they were going to do something, but it was even cooler. Like I took a picture, forwarded it to my kids. And
How much was the hotel per night?
What's that?
What, if you don't mind me asking, how much was the hotel per night?
It was above average. I think it was like $350.
Yeah. So, I mean, they probably spent, to have, now you're average selling and advertising for them. And they probably spent what? $30, $40 all in with everything. I mean, 10% of the cost for one night. And I don't know if you stayed more than one night or not, but I mean, it's well,
and they charge us extra to have a dog. So there was a dog fee.
There's a dog fee.
So we probably paid for our own gift, but I didn't even think of all that now that you're telling me this.
No, but I mean, most people, imagine if they had found out all of that without asking you. Now, which oftentimes as a mortgage broker, you go visit with people, or you can professionally stalk them on Facebook or Instagram or whatever else. Like, that's the cool thing, is when you can, the reason Cameron was so blown away by the Brooks Brothers, one, is a lot of clothes, but two, like, I found out his shirt size and clothing size and all that stuff without him knowing about it. So the element of surprise, you can do something for somebody's kid or dog or spouse or assistant or whatever, and they have no idea that it's coming. Like, that's where people like cry. That's where it goes from like you texting one picture to you posting, maybe 100,000 people. People don't realize the fact of, like, when you can blow somebody away, like, everybody's their own publishing media company now, like, in the viralness of things, like, it's crazy where you start to see some of this go. But that element, that extra question, that extra bit of research, that extra follow-up on social media, like, if you leverage that the right way, that's where you melt somebody's face off, and they're like, I didn't even tell you I had a dog. How did you know? It's like, because details matter, because I did my homework. Like, goes a long way.
Yeah, no, you're right. Someone just posted that your book is awesome, brings up a lot of things you wouldn't normally consider. My 28-year-old son owns a marketing company and has hired John for 3 of his clients. So it sounds like you're giving some value. She called out that Yeti cups, including to the kids. So I don't know, are Yeti cups one of your moves?
I don't work with Yeti because I think that they've lost their compass when they get sold out to private equity. They're not great on the customer service side anymore. So we work with a different company on the cooler and on the, if we do water bottles, we make sure that they're the nicest, that they are all personalized. And the big kicker is most adults already have multiple water bottles, but if you include, smaller ones with cool colors, that are personalized to all the kids, or maybe even one for the dog to have water on a walk or whatever else. Like, that's how we would take something that most people would do at like a level 7 and like figure out a way to do it at a level 12. So I'm all for I call them practical luxuries. I like to do things like the Yeti cup, but if I'm going to do it, I want to do it in a way that's never been done before. So when they get it, they're like, this is now my favorite and only cup that I'm ever going to use. Versus what most people do is they do a Yeti, or they do a Yeti knockoff, and they slam their logo on it, and they basically try to turn the person into a billboard, which makes them less likely to use it or sell for you because they feel manipulated, or they feel like you're trying to, turn them into an advertisement, which doesn't feel like a gift. It feels like a promotional product. So a lot of people will take the item and latch onto the item itself and realize it's the little details around it that make it either land like a gift or land like a promotional item. And that's the difference.
So your advice and your framework would be to get, like, let's say you're going to do a water bottle, get the best one possible. By the way, is that something they can buy through you, or is that something you can tell us what it is?
Oh
Because
yeah. Yeah. So we absolutely. I mean, based upon needs and quantity and who the people are and whatever else. Like some people, like they want like a 40 ouncer, whereas if you're going to do something for the masses, that might be too big. So if you're going to do it for 100 people, you might do it a little bit more like, like a 24 ounce size. But to me, it's the item itself is just a delivery vehicle for the feeling. So being able to customize it with somebody's last name, being able to know that they have kids. Like we're doing somebody who's a big Yeti fan who has $100 million company. I'm like, I found out that he loved it, but the big thing was I know he has two daughters, and I know what's going to melt his face off is, including his two daughters with these cool special like unicorn colors that, and it's still high quality. Like that's what's going to melt his face off. Like he's already got 100 water bottles. That's not a big deal. So it's most people are like, oh, I just want to do one water bottle. I'm like, if a relationship's really important and they have a spouse and 3 kids, is it really that big a difference to like send 5 bottles out to the person? Like to me, like a lot of people cut corners and miss out on the impact by not going all in on the relationship.
what about someone just posted whiskey bottle and some really cool whiskey glasses? And I have received some cool bottles of whiskey myself, and I know I appreciated it. It didn't make me cry, but I was like, "This is pretty sweet."
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I like it if the glasses are personalized. I like it if it's a whiskey. If I know that they like whiskey or bourbon or whatever else, I think a lot of people will find out somebody's into bourbon, and they'll send them a bottle of Maker's Mark, and that person loves Pappy. And so you send something to somebody and they already have, and it's going to go into the cellar or it's going to get regifted because it's not even, it's like gifting, if somebody's into hot sauce and you send them Tabasco sauce, and internally they're thinking this person doesn't know hot sauce. Like Tabasco would have been like 15 years ago. So if you find out somebody has a hobby, make sure that you're getting them their absolute favorite Napa wine or their absolute favorite bourbon, and then pair it with the consumable, because eventually that bottle hopefully is going to get drank, right, and be gone and kind of forgotten about. But if you pair it with really cool glasses that are personalized, and maybe some coasters that are personalized that maybe have their favorite quotes from Winston Churchill. So if you can take the consumable and do it world class and know that they really love it, and then pair it with a tangible that every time they use the glasses now and they're drinking your competition's whiskey, they're thinking of you. That's the goal, is give them that artifact. So if I do wine, I never do wine by itself. I pair it with a couple $100 wine tool because I want them to use that wine tool for the next 50 years. I'm not giving them a $10 wine tool. They already have a bunch of those in the kitchen drawer. I want to give them a nicer tool than what they currently have, personalized with their autograph or their last name or something, so that becomes the only one that they use. That's the key, is to give them a world-class artifact, a practical luxury that becomes their favorite versus just a mediocre mass one.
So guys, right down, and I love that term, artifacts and functional art, where you could give something someone that, they're going to remember, probably doesn't have your logo on it if you want it to be amazing. Cool. So guys, keep sharing ideas and strategies. We still got 15 minutes left in this conversation, although we will wrap it up a little early if you guys don't drive the conversation. So John, you're talking to, thousands of loan officers in the mortgage coach community. And this community has a couple things in common. Everybody in this community wants to go beyond the transaction. So you're not talking to average LOs, you're talking to loan officers. 34% of loan officers that do over 100 loans a year use Mortgage Coach. They're our customers. So it's a pretty successful elite group. And then it's people who want to be successful and elite. So very competitive. Now, our software and what we do, we believe that technology is important in today's market. One of the little gifts that we tell people to do all the time, I think personal notes are great and you should absolutely do them. But I think just a little text video is a great little gift. Like
100%.
Pulling up your phone and instead of texting, hey, it was great meeting with you, turning on the video and looking in the eye which is if you're looking in the eye, you're looking in the camera, and telling them, hey, I really dug our conversation. It was great to see you. 15-second, 30-second, thank you. We like using technology. Now, I like bringing you in because you bring in a new, like, artifacts, real world gifts, but knowing that you're talking to a community of either incredibly elite, successful loan officers or wannabe, and we like technology.
Yeah.
Any ideas?
Yeah, well, what I would say is, I mean, I like tech too. Like this isn't a dog collar. This is a thing called a hat bee. It uses electromagnetic frequencies to duplicate the feeling of nicotine in your system or caffeine in your system or melatonin. So we're an investor in this company, and so I love health and wellness. I love tech. I love all those different things. I think the challenge with some tech is people will give out, it used to be cool to give out an iPad or an iPhone or whatever else, but people anymore, like those are replaced every 6 months. So I stay away from certain tech. But if we've worked with a company called Listen, which is a headphone company that helps people overseas restore hearing, and they make the casing on the headphones out of reclaimed wood, so they're green.
Ooh.
Their audio quality is through the roof. They're partnered with Delta on their headsets on first class, and they have a good cause, a good mission. Master and Dynamic is another super high end. So like, I love taking, like most people, Bose was like 10 years ago. I'd rather give Master and Dynamic because I feel like it's like the Mercedes or the Rolex of headphones. And people tend to keep headphones for a lot longer versus an iPhone that's getting, replaced every 6 months. So I'm all about tech. On the video side, to your point, we have different versions of our book. I originally printed 50 copies of my book, the leather bound, inside a linen box, inside a leather bag, and it was $200 a piece. We now have different versions of our book that come with a built-in video screen that I can upload a custom video. So when I send my book out to somebody, it might be a $100 version of the book or a $2,000 version of the book. But the packaging and the tech in the video, to me, at the end of the day, like, we all want to communicate face to face, and we can't. A lot of things are being done virtual right now, but I hate just posting on somebody's Facebook wall with a text. My closest friends all get a video from me. So I love leveraging the old school, like handwritten note, but adding in the flair and the sexiness and the uniqueness, because we're visual as human beings. And the video element to me is a huge thing that I think is under leveraged on the delivery vehicle for a gift.
So let's break this down because, we all get a lot of, everybody knows our birthday now. So, things on our timeline, and that's nice. A text, that's nice. Phone calls are nice. But I mean, text videos are like kind of the new wow. And again, we're going to screw this up in a couple of years. And
of course,
maybe
marketers ruin everything.
But do you agree, like, text videos aren't screwed up yet? Like,
no,
you send a text video to someone, whether it was a thank you for a meeting, or whether it's happy birthday, that's a good thing to do. You agree with that?
Yeah, 100%. I send out videos. I think, going back to the best reason to send a gift is not transactional, not referral, just because. And a video is the same way. Like when you say, hey, you know what, I just love you. I just love working with you. Like, I just was thinking about you, and here's 3 things I see you doing that I just love how you're showing up in the world. You send that to somebody, you're not asking for anything, and it's just on a random Tuesday. Like when you do those sorts of, like you said, it takes 15 seconds, 30 seconds. Somebody gets that. Oftentimes you don't know, like they might be going through something really rough, or, like their kid's sick or whatever else. Like a lot of times the landing point on that is just like, you get people reaching back out. They're like, you didn't know I needed that really, really bad. But it also feels good, as the person sending it, to just say, I'm not asking for anything. I don't need a favor. I don't need a referral. Like, I'm doing this because of the relationship. And so 1,000%, I couldn't agree with you more.
And guys, this is just a good reminder, the mortgage coach video, when you give a family their mortgage options and then you're talking to them personally, say their names, hey, John and Sue, repeat back what their top goal was. And then you tell them why you delivered the total cost analysis. That may only take you 30 seconds to 90 seconds, 2 minutes max, but that's a gift. I mean, that is a gift of your time, your presence, showing them you heard them. And it didn't, again, just little things matter. That's one of the things that we power with our technology. It's like most loan officers,
Super smart.
they give a family a fee worksheet that it's either in an email or a PDF. And we, have this platform that shows them options, graphs and charts, and then you can put a video on it. Does that sound like a good idea from Mr. Giftology?
The video is the secret sauce. Because I mean, at the end of the day, I don't care who you are, we want to be heard. Like that's like one of our most internal, like we want somebody to understand us. And when you can greet somebody by name and repeat back what you heard, that, hey, here's the goals that you said were important to you, and this is why I positioned it. Like, yes, we all like pretty pictures, and when we go to Chick-fil-A or whatever else, we point to the picture and say, I want that. So we're all visual, but when you can add in the visual thoughtfulness, and people say, well, it's the thought that counts, John. Like I sent an email, I'm like, no, it's the thoughtful thought that counts. And so by being able to repeat back what you heard them say, like to me, that's gold to people's ears.
I love it. So let's go into wrap up mode. First of all, remind people, we've got an audience, they're watching it. If they want to check you out, go to your step-by-step playbook. We'll put a link down below, buy your book. Anything else that you want to engage our community? Should they follow you on social media? If so, where? How do people keep in touch with you?
Yeah, I mean, follow me at John Ruhlin on Instagram is probably the most active place. But in general, like to me, my wrap up would be like people like it's really hip and popular and cool to talk about gratitude journals and hey, I write down what I'm grateful for. And what you opened with at the beginning was people don't realize gratitude isn't just a feeling, it's an action. Like if you just feel gratitude and don't take any action, then you're missing 80% of the impact of like whether that's writing a note, whether that's sending a video, whether that's gifting like you mean it. Most people like show up just kind of halfway. And to me, it's better to do nothing at all than to do something halfway, like be lukewarm, to be like this mediocre in the masses. And so to me, my big challenge would be, you can go download the Giftology system and all these other things. But unless you're willing to put your money and your time where your mouth is, then this is just going to be another check the box, and it's not going to have the impact on the relationships that you're really wanting. That, like we're all getting hit at least 30,000 messages a day digitally, like with all of the different things. And the only way you're going to get referrals in deal flow and opportunity is to be like trusted and top of mind. The only way you're going to be top of mind is if you hit somebody at the heart level. And that's all we're really saying is like, gift and love on people like you mean it, have a plan, invest in the relationships like they matter, and treat people in business the same way you would treat your inner circle family. And if you do that, relationships will thrive. Whether you use Giftology or not, like the recipe's there. Take it, use it, and execute on that action.
Well, guys, I don't know if we're going to get any better than that closing sentence. So I'm going to close on that. This will be uploaded into our YouTube channel within an hour. Check out John. Hopefully you'll do some text videos. Hopefully you'll make sure you put a video on the Mortgage Coach TCA. And if you got nothing else from this, you're going to upgrade the quality and the thought you put into the gifts to the people that you're investing in having relationships with. And you got some ideas on how to do it. John, I appreciate you making time for the Mortgage Coach community, brother. And hopefully I see you in the real world. Please tell Jack Daly what an important person, just who he is and the adventure he lives and the way he lives his life. I mean, if guys
Awesome.
Follow Jack Daly, I think he goes by John Daly on Facebook, but I mean, this dude measures everything. I mean, like he knows how many days this year he's drank wine. He knows how many steps he's taken for the year. Follow up with that dude, but make sure you tell him I said hi.
I definitely will.
All right, dude. Have a good one, brother.
Hey, thank you. Thanks for having me, Dave.
All right. This call's a wrap, everybody. Take care. Give it a like if you got value. Give it a love if you loved it. Share it with your team. Take care.